Have you ever felt like your brain is a web browser with maybe 47 tabs open?
Oh, absolutely. And one of them is definitely playing music.
Right. And you have no idea which one it is, and you can't figure out how to stop it?
Yeah, that is basically the defining background noise of the modern workday, you know?
It really is. So welcome to today's custom-tailored deep dive. We have a seriously fascinating stack of psychological sources today.
We do, yeah.
And our mission for this deep dive is to extract some ultimate actionable steps to hack your daily workflow, specifically focusing on task management.
Which I think everyone needs right now. I mean, all of these sources point directly to this specific psychological phenomenon called the Zeigarnik Effect.
The Zeigarnik Effect.
Right. And what's fascinating here is that at its core, it's basically the brain's fundamental inability to let go of uncompleted tasks.
Yeah, I was looking through the notes, and it's crazy how the brain heavily biases, like interrupted or unfinished business, way over things we've actually checked off.
Exactly. We just can't let it go.
And this quirk of human memory, it isn't just, psychology trivia. It's the secret culprit behind both massive creative breakthroughs and the exact reason we feel completely burned out by, like, 2 in the afternoon.
Oh, 100%. It drives everything.
So we want to give you, the listener, some highly actionable steps to hack how you manage your workflow. But before we get to the tactics, we have to look at the mechanics of this effect.
We need the origin story.
Right. So I was reading the background on Bluma Zeigarnik's original 1927 experiments.
The cafe in Vienna.
Yes, the bustling cafe. And it just blew my mind that these waiters were basically acting as human hard drives. I mean, they were taking these massive complex orders for large tables without writing anything down.
Yeah, the waiters were tracking countless modifications, drink orders, side dishes flawlessly.
It's incredible.
And Zeigarnik and her professor, the prominent psychologist Kurt Lewin, they were just observing this. They noticed that the waiters possessed this near photographic recall right up until the exact moment the bill was settled.
Wait, so the payment was the trigger?
Exactly. Once the transaction closed, if you asked that same waiter what the table had ordered just like 2 minutes prior, the data was entirely gone.
Wow.
Yeah, they couldn't recall a single detail.
Wait, so completing a task is basically like hitting the empty trash button on our short-term memory.
That is a perfect way to put it, yeah. The empty trash command.
That is so weird. It makes me wonder about the biological mechanism driving that. Like, why does the brain hold on to the tension of the unfinished order so aggressively?
Well, there's actually an evolutionary reason for it.
Okay, I figured it had to be survival related.
Yeah, because from an evolutionary standpoint, an unfinished task wasn't, a forgotten email draft.
Right.
It was a predator you lost sight of in the brush. Or a fire you hadn't finished securing before nightfall.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the stakes were a bit higher than a Slack message.
Just a bit. So the brain had to evolve a mechanism to keep critical, incomplete objectives highly accessible to your conscious thought.
So it's generating tension on purpose.
Precisely. When a task is started but not finished, the brain generates a literal psychological tension. Your working memory dedicates active metabolic resources to keep that mental file open and running in the background.
So today, our brain is treating a half-written quarterly report like a tiger in the bushes.
Biologically. Yeah.
That explains so much.
And Zeigarnik actually proved this in a laboratory setting shortly after the cafe observation.
What did she do?
She brought participants in and had them perform a series of manual and mental tasks, stringing beads, solving puzzles, that sort of thing.
Okay.
She would let them finish half of the tasks, but then she would deliberately interrupt them halfway through the others.
That sounds incredibly frustrating.
Oh, it was. But when she tested their recall an hour later, the participants were far more likely to remember the intricate details of the interrupted tasks.
Because of that psychological tension.
Right. The finished task had just been completely dumped from their working memory.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
It's very much like a television cliffhanger. The narrative builds to this peak of psychological tension. And when the screen cuts to black right before the reveal, your brain desperately demands a resolution.
It needs to know the ending.
Exactly. But translating that survival mechanism to a modern office environment,
Yeah.
that sounds like a recipe for chronic stress.
It is. It really is.
Because if every single unread Slack message, unfinished spreadsheet, and unreturned phone call is generating that exact same cognitive tension, We are carrying around an immense cognitive load all day.
And that load extracts a physical toll. I mean, your brain only possesses a finite amount of working memory.
Right.
We can think of it like the RAM in a computer. When you leave dozens of these mental loops open, you're constantly running background processes.
Which drains the battery.
Exactly. The brain is literally burning glucose to keep those unfinished tasks accessible, and that depletes your mental energy.
Wow.
And that depletion leads directly to mental clutter, decision fatigue, and just systemic anxiety.
Well, that perfectly explains why it is so difficult to disconnect at the end of the day.
Right.
You sit down to dinner with your family or you try to watch a movie, but part of your brain is still actively drafting that email you abandoned at your desk at 5 o'clock.
The tab is still open and playing music.
Yes, exactly. So what does this all mean for the listener who feels just like haunted by these unfulfilled goals?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it brings us to the dual nature of cognitive load. The sources often frame the Zeigarnik Effect as a double-edged sword.
Okay, a double-edged sword. How so?
They call it the muse versus the burnout.
The muse and the burnout. I like that.
Yeah, so on the positive side, the muse, this tension, is actually highly beneficial.
Because it drives us to finish things.
Exactly.
Right.
Without it, we wouldn't possess the inherent drive to solve complex multi-day problems. It's that nagging feeling that forces a coder to hunt down a bug or, a writer to fix a structural plot hole.
Or a musician to fix a nagging chord progression.
Yes, exactly.
So it's basically the architecture of the shower thought. You step away from the desk, but the loop remains open, so your subconscious keeps grinding on the problem until the solution just pops into your head.
Exactly. That's the muse. But then there's the dark side.
The burnout phase.
Right. And that clearly triggers when the volume of open loops exceeds our processing capacity.
When we have too many tabs open.
Yeah. And the research reveals that carrying a heavy burden of unfinished work actively distorts your self-perception.
Wait, really? It distorts how we see ourselves.
It is a massive underlying driver of imposter syndrome.
Oh, wow. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Because
Ah.
you aren't just looking at an organized list of things to do.
No, your brain is actively bombarding you with the signal, look at all these things you failed to finish.
So it morphs from a logistical scheduling problem into an identity problem.
Exactly. You start internalizing the incompleteness as a personal failure.
That is heavy.
It gets heavier. The sources note that this tension extends way beyond the workplace. The Zeigarnik Effect operates really intensely within our interpersonal relationships, too.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, consider an unprocessed negative event with a partner, like an argument that ended in a stalemate.
Right. No resolution.
Because it's unfinished business, it holds a privileged place in your memory.
That is fascinating. So
Yeah.
the exact same mechanism that forced the waiter to remember the unpaid coffee order causes us to replay relationship arguments over and over in our head.
Yes. And if left unchecked, that open emotional loop can completely undermine trust. It puts partners on a downward path of suspicion.
Because the brain just demands closure.
And without it, it will keep surfacing the negative interaction.
Okay, so if our brains despise these open loops so intensely, we should be able to, weaponize that discomfort, right?
We absolutely can.
Because rather than letting the Zeigarnik Effect torture us with anxiety, we can use it to hack our daily task management.
That's where the actionable steps come in.
Right. And the notes outlined a specific strategy to combat procrastination, which I loved because it completely reframes how we traditionally view motivation.
Yeah, we usually operate under the assumption that procrastination is a willpower deficit.
Right, like I'm just lazy today.
Exactly. And the conventional advice is that you need to summon this massive wave of energy and motivation to tackle a daunting project.
But the research suggests a completely different approach based on the mechanics of that cognitive tension.
Yes, the just start rule.
Here's where it gets really interesting for the listener. Instead of trying to carry the weight of the entire project to the finish line in your mind before you even begin,
That's overwhelming.
right, you utilize the just start rule. You only commit to 5 or 10 minutes of work.
That's it.
It reminds me of priming an old, stubborn lawnmower.
Oh, I like that analogy.
You don't have to spin the blade manually for an hour to cut the grass. You just yank the cord once or twice to introduce the spark, and the engine takes over the work of keeping itself running.
That's exactly how the brain works here. Overcoming that initial friction is the only real hurdle.
Just yank the cord.
Right. When you force yourself to open the document and type a single terrible paragraph or, organize just the first column of a massive spreadsheet,
You are deliberately creating an incomplete task.
yes, you have forcefully opened a loop.
So you are basically tricking your brain into caring about the project.
Exactly. Once that loop is open, the biological imperative of the Zeigarnik effect takes over.
The tension builds.
The task begins occupying space in your working memory. And ironically, after those initial 5 minutes, it often becomes more psychologically uncomfortable to walk away from the unfinished task than it is to simply sit there and finish it.
Because your brain wants to discharge the tension.
Right. It wants to hit the empty trash button.
Okay, so pulling the lawnmower cord gets the engine running, but doing that introduces a new vulnerability, I think.
How so?
Well, if I pull the cord on my meeting presentation, right, and then my phone buzzes and I read a text message, and then someone pings me on the company chat and I start typing a reply,
Oh, I see where you're going.
I have just forcefully opened 3 different loops in the span of 5 minutes.
Yes, you have. And this is exactly why the sources make such a rigorous, scientifically backed case against multitasking.
It's the enemy of the open loop.
Every task you switch between creates a new open loop. The modern concept of multitasking is essentially an assembly line of unclosed loop.
So if the listener is prepping for a massive meeting while trying to answer emails, they are basically self-sabotaging.
100%. We all hear that context switching is bad for productivity, but viewing it through the lens of the Zeigarnik effect makes the actual cognitive damage so much clearer.
Because if I pause writing my presentation to read half of an email, that email becomes an interrupted task.
And it immediately starts demanding your brain's RAM.
It generates intrusive thoughts.
Yes. Your brain is now actively splitting its processing power. While you attempt to return to writing the presentation, a background thread in your working memory is constantly evaluating the email.
It's trying to resolve the tension it created.
Exactly. And this split focus heavily degrades your performance on the primary task. It guarantees that both tasks will take significantly longer and, with way more errors.
So the mandate for sequential focus, doing one thing at a time until completion, isn't just about being highly organized.
Not at all.
It's about ruthlessly protecting your brain's processing power. You finish the presentation to actively trigger that empty trash command.
Right.
You clear the cache completely, and then you move to the email inbox with a fully restored working memory.
That's the secret. Completing tasks sequentially discharges the tension one by one. You reclaim your cognitive resources step by step, rather than letting them bleed out across 10 different half-finished projects.
Okay, wait, hold on.
What?
We just spent this entire time establishing that open loops drain our mental energy, they cause burnout, and they degrade focus.
Yes.
And we just established that we need to finish tasks sequentially to clear the cache.
Right.
But one of the key takeaways from the sources advocates for purposefully stopping mid-flow.
Yes.
We are always told to finish what we start, but the sources suggest we should purposefully stop mid-flow. That completely contradicts the idea of clearing my mental space.
It does sound completely contradictory.
Why would I deliberately leave a loop open and trigger the exact tension we are trying to avoid?
This raises an important question about how we pace our breaks, right? It makes sense when we separate rote administrative tasks from complex creative problem solving.
Okay, how are those different?
Well, if you're doing data entry or replying to standard emails, absolutely finish the sequence and clear the cache. Close the loop.
Right. Nobody needs an email lingering in their head.
Exactly. But the rules change for deep creative work.
Like writing or designing.
Yeah. If you're coding a new application or designing a graphic or writing an article and you hit a natural endpoint at 5:00 p.m.
Like finishing a chapter.
Right. If you stop there, you will likely start the next morning staring at a blank screen, trying to build momentum from zero.
Oh, I hate that feeling.
We all do.
I see the distinction. So by stopping right in the middle of a sentence or leaving a very obvious, easily solvable problem for the next morning, you are leaving a cliffhanger on purpose.
Exactly. You are utilizing the positive side of the effect the muse.
Right.
Because the task is explicitly incomplete, your subconscious will continue mulling over the broader creative problem, but without the intense stress of a looming deadline.
So when you sit back down the next day, the momentum is already there.
You don't have to pull the lawnmower cord again because the engine has been idling all night. You know exactly what to type next.
That is brilliant. And the notes actually mention this applies heavily to learning and studying as well.
It does, yeah.
If you are trying to memorize a dense amount of material, purposefully interrupting your study session forces the brain to hold on to the facts more tightly.
Right, because the learning phase wasn't neatly closed out. The working memory just grips the information during the break.
So taking a short break, like a few minutes to an hour, right in the middle of a difficult concept, harnesses the effect to boost memory and recall.
It signals to the brain that the information is critical and unresolved.
Okay, but doing things sequentially and stopping mid-flow creates a new problem for me.
What's that?
What happens when it's Friday evening and I need to completely log off? I mean, I don't want my subconscious chewing on a creative problem or a budget spreadsheet while I am at the park with my family.
Well, of course not.
I want the cache completely wiped. I want zero cognitive tension. How do we disconnect?
Well, for the listener who needs to completely disconnect and relax without the anxiety of the open loop, that requires utilizing a strategy called implementation intentions.
Implementation intentions, which is basically writing it down, right?
Yes.
Because we all make to-do lists, but I always thought of them strictly as organizational tools, just a way to make sure I don't drop the ball on a busy day.
Sure, that's how most people use them.
But the research frames them completely differently. They are literal offloading devices for your brain's RAM.
Exactly. Think about it. If you leave work with a vague sense of, I need to finish that project next week, the Zeigarnik Effect remains active.
The threat of the unfinished task is still hovering.
Right, but research shows that if you write down a highly specific, concrete plan detailing exactly what your next step is, when you will do it, and where you provide your brain with a surrogate form of closure.
Wow. Score one for to-do lists. So you aren't just organizing your Monday morning. You are signaling to your subconscious that the threat is handled.
Yes. The tension dissipates because the biological mechanism trusts the physical system you've written down.
It doesn't need to burn glucose, keeping the file open in your active memory anymore.
Writing it down fulfills the brain's requirement for a resolution without actually doing the work. It frees up your cognitive resources so you can actually be present and relax over the weekend, without the intrusive thoughts of pending work.
That is such a powerful psychological trick.
It really is life-changing if you do it right.
So if you are sitting at your desk right now, listening to this, trying to optimize how you work, we can synthesize all of this into a daily operating system.
Let's hear it.
You beat the friction of procrastination by pulling the lawnmower cord, using the 5 to 10 minute just start rule to force an open loop and let the psychological tension do the heavy lifting.
Yes.
You protect your mental RAM by refusing to multitask, right? Tackle tasks sequentially to avoid intrusive thoughts and clear the cache.
Exactly.
You maintain creative momentum for the next day by strategically stopping mid-flow.
The cliffhanger.
Yep. And you reclaim your personal time by drafting highly specific to-do lists to close loops and relax.
You basically shift the dynamic from constantly fighting your brain's natural survival mechanisms to actively leveraging them for your own workflow.
Which is incredible. But before we wrap up today's deep dive, there was one detail in the sources that really stuck with me. We touched on it briefly, but it is worth bringing back to the surface for the listener to mull over.
About relationships.
Yes. The Zeigarnik Effect doesn't stop at the office door.
Not at all.
It applies intensely to our personal lives, specifically to unprocessed negative events or arguments with a partner.
Because an unresolved argument is unfinished business, the brain grants it privileged status in our memory. It loops the event, constantly searching for the closure it was denied.
Which can breed deep suspicion and hostility if left unchecked.
Exactly.
So we'll leave you with this final thought. If you are currently holding on to a grudge or feeling lingering tension in a relationship, ask yourself, is this an intuition you genuinely need to act on, or is it simply the Zeigarnik Effect? Are you simply trapped in an unclosed emotional loop that just needs a specific plan for closure?
If you enjoyed this exploration of the Zeigarnik Effect and the hidden psychology behind unfinished tasks, subscribe to the channel for more podcasts and videos on psychology, human behavior, productivity, and the mysteries of the mind.